Hello there, this is episode 4 of Destination Unknown, a solo travel experience. This episode is going to be the second part in the Spain series. This covers Barcelona and all of the south of Spain as well as Madrid, and episode 5 will start my travels in Morocco. So as I mentioned last episode, Spain was amazing. I spent a lot of time in there. I stayed in many different cities and met a lot of cool people. At this point in my travels, it's the beginning of June, and I spent the first 2 weeks with my friend Zoe, who was in Barcelona at the time as well. We stayed with her friend Aneshka in this beautiful little flat, and Zoe and I spent most of our time eating good food, drinking lots of wine, and exploring the city.
Cheer, boy! Special sweet!
The best experience I think Zoe and I had was walking back from dinner one night. We ran across this man, probably in his 40s, singing opera under this giant arch, so his voice was being projected really loudly. There was a small crowd gathered around him and we went to watch as well. Now what made this an extraordinary experience was that as we were watching, another man from the crowd walked out to join the man who was already singing. He was about 80 years old, and he began singing the songs with him. 2 or 3 minutes later, another man walked out of the crowd, probably in his late 20s, and all 3 of them took turns singing different parts of opera songs, singing in harmonies. It was amazing. I felt like my heart was exploding with how beautiful the whole experience was, and I was definitely teary-eyed the whole time. After the singing was over, the whole crowd engulfed them, and everyone kept shaking hands and congratulating each other and talking about how beautiful everything was. I ate a ton of pinchos in Barcelona and some other cities as well. Pinchos are like these little pieces of bread with different flavors on top of them. Anything from little hot dogs on top to pesto and cheese, or it could be something like fish or a meat. Each pincho has a little toothpick in it with a color on it, and usually they sell them by color. So for example, the blue pinchos might cost €1, whereas the red pinchos might cost €2, so on and so forth. They were so delicious and you could get so many different flavors in one meal, and that's why I like them so much. By the 13th of June, Zoe left to go on the rest of her travels. I believe it was off to Thailand for her. And I headed off to Montserrat, which is this giant mountain in Spain that you can climb all the way up. There's a giant monk monastery up high on the mountain, and you take a tram up to that spot. Keep in mind, this was summer in Spain. Very, very hot all the time. And when I was at the base of the mountain, it was probably midday. I drank my whole water bottle, I went and filled it up again, and I bought some teepee because I knew I might be staying the night on the top of Montserrat. Unfortunately, I had nowhere to keep my pack at the time. My pack was about 50 pounds full of clothes and all of my supplies, and I had to take that with me all the way up the mountain. It was really hard, and it took me nearly 2 hours to get up there. I took a lot of rest breaks in shady spots. I was really thirsty this whole time, but I was trying to spare my water because I knew I would need it for the next day and the hike down as well. When I made it to the top, it was incredible. You could see a lot of Spain from the top of this mountain. One other traveler hiked up there and I met him. He gave me some gummy bears and some other snacks, which was really nice because I was out of food. I told him I was going to stay the night up on top of the mountain. He thought I was crazy. Last episode, I tried to sleep on top of a water tower, and that didn't work out, so I had to sleep under a bush. And this night on Montserrat was the second time I had to spend a night underneath a bush. It was a really difficult sleep. I felt like the mountain didn't want me there, so I had some really weird dreams about not being welcome there. I took a lot of pictures up here of the sunset and of the sunrise. And in the morning I made my way down the mountain. I didn't have any water left that entire day, so the hike down was a little bit sketchy. I was very delirious on the hike down. and at one point I heard a loud growl from about 20 feet away in a bush. I turned my head quickly to see what it was, and I only saw the butt of an animal walking back into the bushes. I I figured it was a wild dog or a wolf, and that scared the crap out of me. I tried to remember what you're supposed to do if you come into contact with a wolf. And I think you're just pretty much... When I made it back down the mountain to the monastery, I needed water really badly, but the monastery was closed for another hour and a half. I knew I couldn't wait any longer for water, so I snuck into the kitchen and filled up my water bottle and downed a bunch of water. One lady scolded me really badly for doing that because she witnessed me getting the water. She knew I wasn't supposed to be inside the monastery. But I told her, solo para agua, that I was only there for water, and I hurried my way out of there. I love Montserrat. I can't wait to go back there someday. From there, I took a train to Tarragona, a little coastal town in Spain. In this little coastal town, in the little drugstores that I went into, 2 times the security beepers went off as I was walking out of the store. I still don't know why that happened. It must have been one of the notebooks or my backpack's barcode that set it off. But it was really hard to explain to people who only spoke Spanish why I was having the beeper go off and that I didn't have anything in my backpack. Both times I showed them inside of my backpack that I had not stolen anything, but they weren't convinced. I couldn't really go back to those stores after that. Now, once I was in Tarragona and a lot of the other southern coastal cities as I went along, breakfast was free in the hostel and was actually a little bit nicer. A lot of times they would have an egg dish or some sliced meats. It was great to have real food for breakfast. Lunch would usually consist of some type of snack, some nuts or a power bar, and some fruit like a banana or an apple. Sometimes I would buy lunch out as well. And then dinner was usually the meal that I ate in the hostel. I would buy bread, olive oil, hummus, tomato, cucumber, and some salami, and that would usually be my dinner for the night. Those were things that didn't spoil easy and that I could eat over and over, day by day, and not really get too bored of it. In Tarragona, one day I was eating a burger for lunch and I was studying Spanish. And one of the waiters came up to me, his name was Jordi. He introduced himself and he asked if I wanted to go out for a beer. I took him up on his offer and I met him and a few of his friends. They spoke better English than I spoke Spanish, but it was still a little bit hard to communicate. Jordi and his friends and I would basically just drink beers, hang out, laugh. We talked about all sorts of stuff. The weather, women, rock climbing, the state of the world, all while chain smoking roll-up cigarettes. Jordi invited me out to go party with his friends as well. The party crew included Jordi, Xavi, another Jordi, Moni, and Paula. We went to go see a punk rock concert, which was really fun, and then we stayed out till 5:30 a.m. drinking and partying. I took a liking to Paula, which is funny because as I read in my journal today, a couple other people joined us and we hung out, drinking and playing around. Paula was really nice. Would have asked her out, but she is lesbian. I thought that was pretty hilarious because I was flirting with her and having such a good time. Turns out she wasn't attracted to me at all. I took a bus from Tarragona over to Valencia. And Valencia is a beautiful city in Spain. It has a lot of crazy architecture going on. I met Dominic from Italy there. Dom was a super cool dude, very smart. We talked about traveling, existence, all the good stuff as usual. Along with Dom, I met Emily and Charlotte from Australia and Emma from Canada. The 5 of us hung out a lot in Valencia. We saw a lot of the attractions and we went out to party a bit as well. The 5 of us who would usually stay up late talking and drinking in the hostel and then end up getting kicked off of the terrace because we were too loud. Charlotte and I hung out a lot. We got to know each other very well. I hope you're doing well, Char. One activity that most hostels offer is a pub crawl. They market it as a way to get cheap alcohol, visit a bunch of bars, and meet a whole lot of new people as well. I tried to avoid them though. Usually they cost about 35 euros, which I didn't want to spend in the first place. And it didn't particularly interest me to go out drinking to meet people. A lot of times I did that anyway, but we would just go on our own time to any bar that we liked. I think pub crawls are a great choice for a lot of travelers, but not for what I wanted to do. Now, the next city I was supposed to go to after Valencia was Cuenca. I had a hostel room booked there already, but everyone in Valencia kept talking about the San Juan Festival. They said, you have to stay, you have to stay. I had no idea what it was, and it turns out it's an insane festival in Valencia. Even though I had already paid for that room, I decided, I'll sleep on the beach after the festival. Turns out, I didn't sleep at all. We started at 6 p.m., drinking tequila on the bus over to the beach, and there were hundreds of people on the beach. Volleyball games, tents, barbecues. Everyone was extremely intoxicated. I hung out with all sorts of random people all over the beach, played volleyball. I lost my shirt somehow for 2 hours, and it showed up 2 hours later in another group of people. At 4 a.m., a cleanup crew came and cleaned up all of the trash that people had left out from the San Juan Festival. I still stayed up, made new friends, ran around, did flips. I ended the night, in quotes, at about 8 a.m. by doing a front flip off of a tent. I had a really hard time getting back to the hostel. My brain was not working at all, I had not slept a wink, and I had had a bunch of tequila, rum, all sorts of drinks. I couldn't figure out the bus system, and I was sitting in the bus stop nodding off for like 45 minutes. At that point, I just decided to walk back to the hostel, but I had to stop a couple times to get water and snacks because my body was not doing well. I finally did take a bus to Cuenca. It was a really interesting little town. I met Michael from New Mexico, an art teacher, a very nice guy, and I explored the city pretty much by myself. The most fun thing I did in Cuenca was I took a hike up to Jesus. It was this big statue of Jesus, and I made a little parkour video there with music from Ivan Ave. This is the one.
Time won't tell. I'ma beat it till it well. I'ma beat it into a beat it young. I said, hey, my fly goose flew south, new routes. Yeah. I see you blooming in the drought though.
The next city I went to was Madrid, the capital of Spain. I had seen a ton of parkour videos done in Madrid, and even though I didn't know any of the spots, I ended up finding them just by exploring the city. I made a parkour video here as well. I attended Pride Madrid. I had never seen so many people in a small space before. And these days with Corona, you can't even imagine that ever happening again. Quite a few terrorist attacks had been happening in Europe in 2017. The most recent terrorist attack had been at an Ariana Grande concert that killed 22 people. That was big news. And so at Pride Madrid, they were really afraid that another attack might happen. They had security guards all over the roofs of the buildings watching everybody in the crowds. Also, going into the concert or the festival, there were policemen checking everybody's bags. Me and a couple friends going to the festival were trying to bring in some beers, which the cops said was not allowed. I asked if I could drink them right then and there, and they said yes. So I chugged 2 beers in front of the cops as they cheered me on. My friends also drank their beers down very quickly. I I met up with Shar again in Madrid, and we hung out a lot. She was nice enough to film me doing parkour as we explored the city. Before I left Madrid, I got a single-person room in a little hotel because it was cheap enough for me to afford. I believe it was like 30 euros for one night, and that was such a sigh of relief. Even though the room was hot and a little stuffy, it felt so nice to be alone. It was the first time I had slept alone in a room since Ireland when I was in the caravan. Some people, I guess, don't need that much privacy, but I needed a lot of alone time, and having a private room was amazing. I went next to Granada. This was one of my favorite cities in Spain. So much culture there.
J'ai habité beaucoup avec des Israéliens.
First of all, there's the Alhambra, which is the place that everyone goes. The Alhambra is this big castle, entirely Arabic architecture, and there's flowing rivers, and there's gardens everywhere, beautiful tiles. I went there with Charlotte and Sarah, a new girl I had met, also from Australia. This is some audio I have on my phone. I love it. It's of Sarah making whale noises while we're in this really echoey room in the Alhambra.
Come back.
You're way too good at that. Also, Granada apparently birthed flamenco music, as well as flamenco dance. We got to go see a flamenco concert, and it was mind-blowing. A lot of the time, the dancers and the musicians are improvising, but they click so well together, and they understand where they're moving along into the song, when to slow down and speed up. I cried a few times during that show. We also got to see some flamenco on the streets. Here's a clip of that. Watching the concert almost felt like church. It felt like these musicians and dancers were in a meditative state, almost experiencing God as they went through this improvisation. And after the show, I felt so inspired, I needed to do some parkour. Because to me, movement was God. And by moving my body, I could be in that meditative state. Now, up until Granada, I had drinking a bunch, but I'd never gotten a hangover. One night, though, I went out partying with people as usual. I drank a bottle and a half of wine, and then I drank about a half a bottle of Jameson. I went to bed hoping I wouldn't throw up during the night. I woke up late and wasn't able to check out of my hostel. I had to stay another night. But the hangover was so bad. I couldn't think, say anything. And I know a lot of people have experienced this, but I had not. This hangover lasted about 2 days and really messed up the next part of my travels. I know you're not supposed to mix alcohols in the first place, but I would for sure not recommend drinking whiskey and red wine at the same time. Really not a good mix. A great part about Spain is as you're moving south through the country, things get cheaper and cheaper. Beers were 2 to 3 euros, and in the south of Spain, they usually came with tapas, which are little side plates of food, maybe a mix of rice or something of the sort. So you usually got free food with your booze, which was amazing. Again, Granada was my favorite city in Spain. I highly, highly, highly recommend going there and experiencing all that they have to offer. From Granada, I went to Malaga. I didn't enjoy Malaga that much, partially because I was having the worst hangover of my life. Also, the beach there was really dirty, stinky. The water was gross, and that didn't make me very happy because I couldn't swim there. I only stayed in Malaga for about a day. From Malaga, I went to Sevilla, another one of the coolest cities in Spain. I stayed in a hostel called the Black Swan. They had some cool activities that they offered. One of them was a Paella and Sangria cooking class for about 15 euros. That was really cool. Paella is this huge dish of rice that's all cooked at once with spices, and it has some kind of meat, usually some kind of seafood. I believe originally it was rabbit meat that was put in paella. And Sangria, as you probably know, is a delicious type of sweet red wine. I did this class with and hung out with Otto. He's from England, so technically his name is Otto, but I'm American, so I don't speak like that. Anyway, I took the cooking class with Otto, and it was a really fun time. I would also end up accidentally meeting him in Morocco again with his cousin Isaac, and we would travel together for 2 weeks. Also at the Black Swan, I met a couple Danish dudes who are musicians, and they were recording and playing music around the world. I recorded some music with them in the courtyard of the Black Swan. Here's a little snippet of that. A funny experience I had in Sevilla was when I was training parkour out in a public square. I was doing flips off of walls and doing lots of vaults, and 3 old ladies came up to me. They were telling me, "This skill is not useful. You will break your head. Why would you do this?" And I was trying to explain to them that this is something I did all the time. Not only that, but it was useful, that it was my job. Es mi trabajo. But they really didn't get it. And I always think it's funny when there's a clash of perspective. I'm doing parkour because I love it, and even though there is an element of danger, it's one of the more fun things I can do in my own life. But to these ladies, useless skill, why would you do that? You're gonna hurt yourself. While I was staying at the Black Swan, I decided that instead of moving on to Portugal for the next part of my travel, that I would try out Morocco. I thought, when am I gonna have another chance to go to Morocco? And it's only a couple hour ferry ride to get over there from Spain. I looked up ferry tickets to go to Morocco, and it turns out they had open tickets, which meant I could take a ferry to Morocco and then at any time take a ferry back without scheduling which ferry I was going to take. It was only 36 euros for an open ferry ticket, so I was very down. That wraps up episode 4 of Destination Unknown. Episode 5 is going to start with my ferry ride over to Morocco. Morocco was one of the trippiest places I've ever been, and the most uncomfortable I've ever been, especially traveling solo. If you watched through and you enjoy my content, please leave it with a like, maybe possibly a subscribe. I'd appreciate that mucho. See you next time.